The late Christian leader, Billy Graham, talked about our current societal situation in North America. He says there was no doubt that our generation, he said, suffers from moral uncertainty. He says we have a great deal of levity, but little real joy. There is searching on the part of young people for fun, but little real happiness. There's a great deal of canned laughter on television, but it's empty and hollow. He says we are zealous for freedom, but we are weak in our worship of God. We boast over military strength, but our television screens show that it is brutal in application. We have everything, but possess nothing. We seek knowledge, but lack understanding. There's plenty of struggle upward, but we continue to sink lower. When Paul speaks of his future and the future, he has this deep joy, doesn't he? And a focus in his life that speaks into his present and into his past. He speaks of this transformation that is happening in the life of those who follow Christ. When you think of the word transformation, what do you think of? It's kind of a word of change, like a butterfly, right? We think of a butterfly that changes from the cocoon, right, to a butterfly. What a drastic transformation. Last week we studied how Paul came to believe in the value, right, that Christ brings to his life that wasn't based on his own accomplishments or achievements. This perfect love of Christ that loves us at our worst, right, he talks about. Paul encourages us to apply that love to our daily perspective in life. In other words, Christ loves us at our worst, but he loves us enough not to leave us unchanged by his love. Paul admits that this, though, is a process of transformation, as he admits that he has not already obtained what he wants to, the perfect way of living that Christ is calling for him. He says, he presses on. He presses on. Press on is a powerful word of determined following. Press on is a phrase that can be used as a good pursuit, as in a pursuit, or in a pursuit that kind of seeks revenge or to persecute. As my daughter was studying Hamlet, right? She was letting me know that Hamlet was so pursuit of revenge that it ruined his life. He was pressing on revenge so much that it consumed him. That's the word that Paul's using here, a consuming pressing on. Paul understands this pursuit to harm as well as because the way he once lived towards Christians. We forget that. He was a man that was drastically changed, transformed. So much so, listen to what Acts speaks of Saul, which was what it was known. He even changed his name probably to differentiate himself because he was such a changed man. He says in Acts 8:3, it says, but Saul began to destroy the church. Going from house to house, he dragged off men and women and put them in prison. The major transformation in Paul was being a man who pressed on to destroy Christians, to a man who pressed on to serve Jesus. How did that transformation happen? Paul states that Christ took hold of him. Christ reached down and grabbed me and saved me and changed him by understanding the depth of his forgiveness and love. Do we still believe that Jesus can transform lives today? That's a question I've been really wrestling with in my own life. As we face difficulties, churches are getting smaller and smaller. We're not seeing that life change, maybe even in ourselves. When we walk the roads or in our schools and we hear the vulgar swearing, it seems like, or in our workplaces, it seems people don't care about God at all. or when people are out enjoying the good life on this Sunday morning, probably, they seem to care less about God or Christ. Or the bitter people that we meet, right, who feel God has deserted them in some form of hardship, past hardship. Do we believe that Christ can transform them? Or are they some hopeless case? How do you think those early Christians, dragged off from their homes into prison by Paul, thought about the possibility of his transformation? I think they doubted it. I think but Paul was a living example of the power of Jesus to transform someone's life. God changed his passionate heart, pressing on to persecute Christians, to a pressing on, going from home to home now to share the love and forgiveness of Christ. We're going to do something a little different than I normally do. Normally I pray after my message. But I want to pray specifically different points during the message today. And first part of I want to pray is for God to transform hearts once again. We can see Christ's power at work. So I want you to think of somebody in your life, maybe that you think there's no way I could see this person transform and change. There's no way. Maybe something in your past too. Maybe somebody that's harmed you in the past too as well. Like a Paul had done to those early Christians, right? That there's no way for God to help that person or help me get beyond what they've done to me. So I just want you to hold those up now as I just say a short prayer, and then we'll continue with the message. Because God's Word is meant for us to interact with it and to live it and breathe. It's living and active and breathing. It's for us to interact with it. Lord Jesus, who would have thought that you could change someone's life? But Lord, isn't that the point? That your power is available. We think of those people right now that in our minds seem unchangeable, or situations, or from our past, the hurt that seems to hold us down. We place those before you now. Come and work your transformation in our lives. Help us to see once again your power that's at work in the world. Paul talks about another transformation in this text. Where Christ transforms our minds, how we think. Jesus changes our thinking from focusing on earthly things to heavenly agenda, to understanding heaven's agenda. Now, Paul realized that Christ had called him heavenward, he says, or to understand this goal, a calling, that he understood he had a calling to go understand heaven's agenda. The cross, of course, was a symbol for Paul of God's agenda for Paul. Now, Paul was quite a learned man, so he struggled with this at first. In all his studying, he knew what the law, Old Testament law, said about someone that died in a pole or wooden. It says if someone is guilty in Deuteronomy 21 of a capital offense and is put to death, their body is exposed on a pole. You must not leave the body hanging on the pole overnight. Be sure to bury it the same day, because anyone who is hung on a pole is under God's curse. Paul knew that. So he struggled. How could Jesus be God's Messiah, saving him, if he died on a cursed death? A cursed death. So his original thinking was to reject Jesus as the sent one from God. Because how could someone who died on a pole of wood be God's sent one? Because they were under that curse. His thinking was changed, though, to realize that Christ's death was to take the punishment of breaking God's law by becoming the curse for us. In Galatians 3, he eventually wrote, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. And he says, for it is written, cursed is everyone who is hung on a pole. See, Paul suddenly had his thinking changed. It was suddenly off of just what his agenda was in life, but it was suddenly what was heaven's agenda, what was God's agenda for him over that earthly perspective. He realized our perspective was so much limited. So we too need heaven's wisdom to understand our earthly calling. That God is calling us as well. Now, wisdom isn't simply knowledge, but it's how to live and apply that knowledge every day. Paul encourages the believers what? To follow his example and learn from his life. Okay? Now, what he's saying there, I really believe, is how Christ transformed him is the example that he sets before us. Not his own great achievements. We know just the chapter before, right? He kind of said, that's nothing. All my achievements of the past, nothing compared to knowing Jesus and his love. Paul wants us to know that God's wisdom is to learn from those Christians who deeply understand God's forgiving love for them. How he can press on where he was persecuting, how love of Christ transformed him to serving and being a part of God's agenda. People that understand and know that love in their lives. That's the example Paul says to follow. He says many people, live for their own desires, right? The God of their stomach. That's a phrase used to our appetites, right? Whatever I want in life, I go after and get. But not for the Christian anymore. Because once you experience God's love, and Christ's love for you, then you see the cross as an example for that love. That's why he says those people that live for their own desires see the cross as an enemy. They're enemies of that cross because they don't want to see and understand Christ's forgiveness and love, and that Christ has an agenda for their lives. Christ wants us to have a heavenly minded perspective on our life. And the wisdom to understand Christ's love and his calling to share that love with others. So I'd like to do a transformation prayer that God would give us the wisdom that we need. So there might be a situation in your life where you're really seeking some wisdom. Maybe you're trying to understand your calling and how to help somebody in a situation in your family. Right? How can I be Christ's witness in this situation? It seems to be, anytime I try, I mess up, and I need Christ's power and wisdom to know what to do. So I just want to encourage you to think of a situation that you're facing right now. Because Scripture says if any of you lacks wisdom, we should ask God. So we're going to do that. If there's a situation where you need some wisdom to help God transform your mind, to understand heaven's perspective of your situation, let's pray a second for that. Our God in heaven, you see things that we can never see. And your agenda is so much bigger than ours. And Lord, whatever situations that we're facing right now, where we need wisdom and your understanding, we pray that you will hear the prayers of your people. You'll see their hearts. Because we trust that your word and what it says to us, that if we lack wisdom, you will give it to us. Help us to know how to serve you and be a part of your agenda in this world. Renew our minds by the power of your word. Jesus. Amen. That's not all. There's more. Let's get excited now because this is really good. This is good news, church. The last transformation Paul mentions in the future for us is a reward for loving and serving Christ in this world. Our earthly, decaying, lowly bodies will be transformed to be like his glorious resurrected body of Jesus. Isn't that good news? I look forward to that so much. Being reunited with the loved ones who followed Christ so long before feel like they're cheering me on right now. We need to be cheered on from them too. This transformation is done by Christ, and he wants us to know about it. When Christ comes again, Paul says, he will renew all things by his power that brings everything under his control. He's encouraging us, Paul says, to live with a view to the end, our heavenly destination, our eternal citizenship, the place where we truly belong. Any runner, I don't know about you, I'm a runner, I try to be, but when you know the end of the course, right, and you're laboring through in the middle, but you know I'm already halfway there, or I know I don't have that much farther, I can fight through this, right? That helps you a lot in the race. So you can mentally, in a sense, see that finish line, and it gives you strength to persevere in the trials during the middle of the race. It's when you're running like a new course, and you don't know how far to go yet, that you can lose heart and want to quit, because you don't have that finish line view. That's what Paul is talking about. He wants us to see the finish line. He wants us to have this perspective of the finish line, the transformation that Christ will bring in our bodies, that we'll be given new bodies. No more death, no more decay, but resurrected bodies like Jesus, he says. In Paul's great chapter of the resurrection of Christ, 1 Corinthians 15, and its meaning for Christians, he encourages Christians. He says, you know what? Always boldly give yourself to the work of the Lord. Why? Because your labor in the Lord is never in vain. It's never in vain. There's a reward. There's a reward coming. So lastly, I think we once again as Christians need to pray that God can open our eyes to the finish line, to that reward that he's prepared for us. That'll help us as we struggle through the journey today. Let's pray. Lord Jesus, I think of even Stephen when he was being persecuted and he saw heaven open and he saw you. He saw where he was heading, that no more harm could come to him. Open our eyes that to see the transformation that you want to do in us one day by serving and loving you, your forgiveness, what it's accomplished for us. It's nothing we have done, but yet you reward us with heavenly bodies, transformed and renewed. Open our eyes once again to that promise, so that as we labor through the storms and trials of life, we can always remember there's a glorious finish for us ahead.